Hey guys, I'm Nikki Elizabeth, the author of the Industrialized series. While Part 1 Experiment here was the first book to be published in this series back in April of 2024, in January of 2024, the very first story in this collection to come out was a novella called Poor Vinnie's Valor. Now, this story is kind of a bite sized version of the world. It introduces a lot of characters that come into play throughout this story, and I actually thought I'd read it to you guys today. It's free pretty much all over the place. You can grab it, at Barnes and Noble as an ebook. I don't have it available in print book form at the moment, so for anyone who just wanted to get to know the story but isn't necessarily an ebook reader, I thought I'd take the time to read it to you guys so you could actually hear it in the author's voice. With that being said, let's dive in. Act 1, Time 22:27. As the door swung shut, Vinnie held her breath and popped her hip out to prevent it from slamming against the frame. It thudded against her flesh inaudibly, and she smirked to herself as she pulled it shut. Cautiously silent, Vinnie was certain nobody knew she was home. It was perhaps 2 o'clock in the morning, but she wouldn't know for sure until she was in the sanctity of her bedroom. There weren't clocks on the base floor of the home, which she thought was just a silly superstition. I wasted time, and now doth time waste me. That was what they said. Living in a portion of Tesland that was prone to earthquakes, there was mass fear surrounding the possibility of being crushed by the upper floor of a house. Supposedly, one couldn't waste time, or be wasted by time, if clocks weren't present on the base story of a home. Vinnie did not know the origin of the superstition, nor did she lend it any credence. She couldn't personally grasp how being on the upper stories of a home during an earthquake was any better than the alternative. In fact, she might even argue that being crushed and killed on the base floor of the home was better than being injured on an upper floor, than lying in agony and hoping for help that may never come. Of course, she wouldn't argue that. She might have. Before. But now, Vinnie was in love. She was totally carefree, and that was the very reason she came home so late. She crept up the stairs, then moved into her bedroom to splash water over her face. She turned on the light, stood before the sink, and admired her reflection as she turned on the water. Her coppery blonde hair washed out her thin, pale face, but her hazel eyes were bright and glowing. If she focused on those sparkling eyes, she might be able to ignore the smeared lipstick and runny eyeliner. The makeup stretched across her cheeks in streaks. Without breaking eye contact with her reflection, Vinnie leaned down and cupped her hands to catch the chilly water. She splashed it over her face, then fetched a makeup remover wipe. First, Vinnie wiped off the ruby red lipstick. Then she wiped her eyes. Before she could lower the cloth, she was aware that she wasn't alone anymore. When she raised her eyes, Vinnie's gaze settled on the reflection of her sister beside her. Milla had been blessed by a perfect combination of recessive genes. Her hair was deep red, her eyes bluer than the ocean, and her skin was totally void of freckles. In fact, it was flawless, just like everything else in Milla's life. Her eyes were full of judgment. Instead of speaking, Milla shook her head and turned to leave. Vinnie reached out and grabbed her sleeve, then gestured to her bedroom. Her sister shook her head in silent protest, but Vinnie mustered the sternest look she could manage. Milla rolled her eyes, but she crept to Vinnie's room without further protest. Vinnie followed closely, pulling the door shut behind them. They stood facing one another, totally silent. For a moment, nothing spoke louder than the camaraderie of surviving adolescence in the same household. Finally, Milla cleared her throat and averted her eyes. "You saw her again, didn't you? Clarissa?" Vinnie lifted her chin defiantly. "What does it matter? Are you going to tell them?" Milla opened her mouth and snapped her jaw shut. She stammered before she managed. "What makes you think I'd tell them?" "Are we going to have a conversation, or are we just going to ask questions all night?" Milla huffed, then sat on the edge of the bed. She clasped her hands between her knees and hung her head. "Sorry, sweetie, I'm just exhausted. I stayed up all night waiting for you. They already know where you were. I wanted to warn you." "They know?" Vinnie sank down next to her sister in disbelief. Tell me that's not true. Milla smiled sadly at her sister. Vinnie blinked away tears and cuddled into her embrace. Milla was just 3 years older, but she felt bigger. She was, actually. Another recessive family gene was admirable height. Vinnie, unfortunately, was petite. Milla had the height of an Amazon warrior and the looks of a goddess. And her divine power? Her hugs were a shield against the harshness of reality. What does this mean, Milla? You know what it means. They're moving forward with the arranged marriage. Vinnie started to cry softly. She turned her head into her sister's shirt and wiped her eyes and nose on the fabric, which Milla didn't even protest about. She felt scandalized on a level she couldn't even process. Her autonomy, her future, and her life were being stolen from her because her parents could not entrust her to make her own decisions. I can't stop them, stated Milla quietly. I can't get you out of this mess. Why not you? Vinnie blurted. Milla ran her eyes over her sister's face. You know why. I'm an adult, Vinnie. I may not have enough rights to secure housing for myself, but I have every right to leave. You don't. They own you. They can sell you. Vinnie lifted her chin again and scowled. I'm 17. Milla nodded slowly. Again, you're a minor. You can't leave. You know the new Sands regime isn't kind to transients, minor or adults. And you know our parents can press charges against Clarissa for interfering with their arrangement and damaging the family reputation. With what money? Vinnie demanded. I'm not stupid, Milla. I know why they want to arrange this marriage. We're broke. Milla pursed her lips and tilted her head, taking in every detail of her younger sister's face. Maybe you should get some sleep. There's nothing we can do, so it's not worth the stress. Vinnie nodded. Without a word, Milla stood and retreated from the room. She paused at the door to gaze at her sister in the darkness before she slipped into the hallway. Vinnie waited until the door was fully shut to move. She crept to the telecommunicator in the corner of the room. Now, without a drop of makeup on her face, she looked plain and mousy. Her sorrowful features were illuminated almost as soon as she scooped up the remote. Staring at her tear-stained likeness on the screen, she situated the headphones over her ears and pulled its microphone near her mouth. Send message, she said quietly, to Clarissa. The telecommunicator rendered for a moment, then opened up a fresh screen. Vinnie pressed the record button on her remote and smiled at the camera. Hey, beautiful, it's me. Milla says I'm caught. They know where I was tonight and decided to move forward with the marriage arrangements. If I don't call you again, just know I want to. I really, really hope I'll see you again. I love you, okay? Good night, baby. I pray this isn't also goodbye. She ended the recording, then watched a replay. Vinnie realized she looked pitiful. Her eyes were huge and watery. Without makeup, she looked years younger. How could such a young, hopeful woman be reduced to this wreck? Despite the intrusive thought, Vinnie sent the message. As soon as she received a notification confirming its delivery, she unplugged the telecommunicator and went to bed. Morning was a time of day Vinnie usually adored. There was something about the promise of a new day that energized and inspired her under normal circumstances. Today, of course, was anything but normal. Mustering all her courage, she got out of bed and made the seemingly eternal trek to the kitchen. Her mother, Virginia, was slaving over the stovetop as usual. Good morning, sunshine, she greeted. I'm making hash browns. As Vinnie lowered herself into her seats, she impaled her mother with a venomous glare. And you're making a marriage too, aren't you? Virginia froze, then scowled. We don't talk to our elders in that tone, Lavinia. Where's Philomela? Upstairs, I assume, she growled. Getting ready for another day in paradise, I guess. It must be easy to be 20 and living on your parents' dime without a job or obligations of any kind. Virginia chuckled as she pinched some spices and ground her fingers over the hot pan. You don't have a job either. I am in school, Vinnie responded. Product management isn't easy. It's best to focus on my studies if I want to build a career. We'll talk over breakfast, stated Virginia bluntly. Then, raising her voice, she called, Philomela! Rick! Breakfast is ready! The sound of a feminine voice emanated out of the upstairs room. Be right down! The clanging of dishes echoed in the hollow of the house. It was broken only by the sound of encroaching footsteps and then a quiet chuckle. Thank you, my dear, came a light, sophisticated voice. It was masculine and rough, yet melodic. The odd juxtaposition of these features perfectly described Rick Bellamy. Rick was a no-nonsense man's man. He was nearly twice as tall as Vinnie and had jet black hair and piercing blue eyes. In another life, he would have undoubtedly been an oil tycoon or some sort of powerful entrepreneur. In this life, however, he was her father and a failed inventor. Like Lavinia, Rick possessed an incredible vision and grasp of product marketing. Unlike Lavinia, he was unwaveringly confident in his abilities. Foolishly so. He'd sunken his life savings into getting one too many pointless inventions off the ground. Now, the survival of the family rested on Lavinia's ability to secure a husband and produce an heir. Had they inched toward bankruptcy a few years earlier, that burden might have fallen on her sister. Behind Rick, Milla padded into the kitchen barefoot. Breakfast smells good. I'm making hash browns, repeated Virginia. Grab a seat, everyone. The family gathered around the table, and Virginia buzzed from person to person to pile their plates high with nutrient-lacking flash-fried potatoes. Then she filled the glass at each seat with orange juice before finally sitting down. Rick, she cooed, can you say grace, please? My pleasure. He lowered his head modestly. O Columbiana, goddess of illumination and progress, patroness of Tesland, praise thee for our food. We pray you continue to bless this household and its residents. In thy honor we seek gifts of benevolence, wealth, health, and happiness in this household and this country. All praise to thee, Columbiana. So are we going to talk about it? Demanded Vinnie. Milla told me that you two are moving forward with the arranged marriage. Both Virginia and Rick had started eating, but they froze at their daughter's question. Rick promptly set down his silverware and stroked his mustache in that frustratingly endearing manner, and Virginia simply recoiled and averted her eyes. Yes, Rick finally answered. Yes, we are. You talk in your sleep, Lavinia. We know you're still seeing that girl. We warned you about that. And your arguments were pointless, retorted Vinnie. Same-sex relationships are legal now. So says an administration that murders people slowly via live stream for minor infractions, spat Virginia. It's not a good time to stand out, baby. We're doing this to protect you. And to protect yourself, said Vinnie. Isn't that true? We're poor, aren't we? This arranged marriage ultimately saves your asses, not mine. The silence that fell over the table was deafening. As Vinnie dragged her eyes from parent to parent, Milla cleared her throat. Don't you dare argue for her, Philomela, spat Rick. You have more life experience than her. You know we're arranging this for all of us. Milla looked at her parents with panicked eyes, then sighed. I'm not arguing. I am just going to suggest we revisit this conversation after I have a chance to spend my morning with Vinnie. I suppose you and Lavinia can have some time to discuss before we revisit this, said Virginia gratefully. She mouthed a blatant thank you at her eldest daughter before dramatically wiping figurative sweat from her brow. As Vinnie and Milla walked along the beach, the women were silent. Part of that was because they had little to say, but the silence also offered a moment to admire the beauty of the shorefront sounds. With each crashing wave, there was another passing moment in which Vinnie could find solace. Solace from her toxic home life. Solace from an arranged marriage she had no say in. It's not right, she whispered. Milla eyed her, then grabbed her hand and pulled her into the shallow water lapping against the beach. It's not. Milla pulled her sister along, traversing the fine overlap between land and sea. I wish it was outlawed. It's a new concept, really. Did you know the Western world didn't really arrange many marriages before our grandparents were born? It's a new tradition. They're just doing it because they don't like Clarissa. That's true. But you are doing this for the family, Vinnie. Do you know what will happen to our parents if we don't marry you up? Truthfully, spat Vinnie, I don't care. They have no right to dictate my future when they know I'm in love. I love you too, Milla. If they said we couldn't see each other, would you be okay with that authority? Of course not. Because we love each other, said Vinnie. Sure, we're blood, but it's the sisterly love we share that binds us beyond our genetics. You know how strong our sisterly love is. Now imagine how strong romantic love is. Do you know what it feels like for someone to choose you? To accept absolutely everything you are and to adore you nevertheless? Can you imagine how strong that is? Milla stopped walking and looked out at the ocean. She sighed and shook her head. No, I can't even imagine. And you, continued Vinnie. You're single and you're beautiful. Plus, you're not in school. You'd be a better candidate for an arranged marriage than me. That's the issue, Lavinia. You're in school. You're brilliance. You are the one with a better chance of producing a brilliant son one day. Beyond that, they can't arrange one for me without my consent. Before Vinnie could protest, Milla raised her hands to silence her sister. Don't. I'm explaining their rationalization. I don't approve of it, but I also don't think we can get you out of this. Vinnie dragged a single toe through the sand, savoring the roughness of each grain. What if I run? Don't, said Milla again. You'd be breaking the law and you could be killed for that. I'm starting to think it might be for the best. Don't be dramatic. I couldn't live without you. Vinnie embraced her sister. And I'll always be here through everything, Vin. You and I suffer in solidarity. Vinnie lifted the glass to her lips unseeingly. As the wine slithered down her throat, it filled her with a warmth that was otherwise absent. Sitting in her oak-toned kitchen, she was uncomfortably aware of how solid the Windsor-backed chairs were. The wine helped keep her from squirming in her seat, but it had yet to ease her discomfort. Across the kitchen table was Bernard. The young man was blonde-haired and blue-eyed, and he had a physique that might have been admirable had he worked for it. He was young enough that Vinnie suspected he was naturally thin, and his profession led her to believe he might be quite a bit heavier later in life. He was just a few years older than Vinnie, but she did know of him. When she was a tad bit younger, a friend's sister, Loretta, had complained about him. He was a young man in love, and he was obsessive. Loretta ignored him at the time, but she feared that his obsession would develop into stalking. It never did, to Vinnie's knowledge, but it wasn't exactly an ideal first impression of her soon-to-be husband. He cleared his throat. I hear you're in school. I am. What are you studying? Product marketing. He nodded, obviously pretending to care, possibly pretending to know what that profession entailed. I was in law school at your age. I just graduated recently, actually, and I'm newly working in the field. I come from a law family. My grandfather and uncle are lawyers, and my father and brothers are police. I'm told the men in my family have worked in law or law enforcement for generations, since Tesland was founded, probably. With each additional word he spoke, Vinnie liked Bernard a little less. He was crass, cocky, and, well, off. Something about his cadence seemed a bit unhinged, though she couldn't quite pinpoint what was wrong. She downed the remainder of her wine, then went to the fridge for a refill. That wasn't ladylike. No, but with politicians threatening to cut alcohol sales, I'm indulging while I can. Plus, it might help me block out your blabbering, she thought. That won't go through. He laughed. I should know. Law is my specialty. Vinnie humphed, and Bernard raised his eyebrows in response. He watched as she pried the cork out, filled her glass, and then forced the cork back into the bottle. As she leaned into the refrigerator, Bernard cleared his throat. Why do I get the impression that you don't like me very much? Must be that lawyer's intuition. As she sat down, Bernard laughed. He grinned at her and raised his glass in salute, which he paired with a respectful nod. So I take it you also disapprove of this arrangement. Vinnie was surprised. She nodded, then leaned forward and propped an elbow on the table so she could rest her chin on her hands. I do. I was in love. I was too, said Bernard quietly. But my grandfather fell ill, and I guess there's some competition among his children now to marry off their children. My cousin Michaela is already married, and her brother Ralph is entering an arrangement like we are. Daniel is married too, but to a man. I think there's a belief amongst our parents that if one of us produces children, then our families might get a bigger chunk of inheritance. That's a sick reason to arrange a marriage for you. It is, he agreed. But like you, I have little say in the matter. It's an honor thing. I think it's a money thing for us, said Vinnie, and a freedom thing for me. I have a proposition, said Bernard with a rebellious twinkle in his eyes. We'll go through with this, but we don't have to intertwine lives. You can keep your friends, your hobbies, your life. I can keep mine. We don't even have to talk, except for family and public appearances. We'll have separate rooms in our house. Deal, Vinnie said without hesitation. Amazing, Bernard. I'm suddenly looking forward to marrying you. Vinnie knocked on Clarissa's door while holding her breath. Clarissa's father opened the door, and he looked instantly surprised. Vinnie, he exclaimed. Come in. Clary's in her bedroom. You really messed her up, you know? Whatever you said to her last has reduced her to tears. I understand, said Vinnie. I feel horrible, but I'm getting married, per my parents. They don't know I'm here. I see, he remarked as he closed the door. I suppose you know where to find her. Without a moment of hesitation, Vinnie climbed the stairs 2 at a time as she rushed to confront her beloved. When she arrived at her closed bedroom door, Vinnie raised her hand to knock, but froze. Her heart was pounding in her chest, and it felt like it was crawling up her throat. She knocked. Go away! Clarissa's response was mousy and sorrowful. It's me, Claire. The door opened, and the women embraced. Vinnie only got a glimpse of Claire's face, but it was red and tear-streaked. Vinnie was crying before she could process the emotional sight of her girlfriend. Your message broke me, Claire whispered. The marriage arrangement is happening? Truly? Truly, Vinnie whispered. I wish it wasn't. But I met him, and he seems to be a good man. He said he was in love too. We're getting married, but we're also keeping our lives. Clarissa's eyes lit up. Your lives? And loves? Vinnie nodded. I'm not parting ways with you. Act 2. Existence. 22:33. For a few years, everything went well. Lavinia fell deeper in love with her beloved, while Bernard did the same with his. Their lives, as promised, were separate. As his grandfather's health declined, however, the time came to produce an heir. After their daughter arrived, Bernard's perspective suddenly shifted. It grew worse when Bernard's grandfather finally passed. You've been seeing her! Bernard screamed as he flipped a table. Stop it! Exclaimed Vinnie. You're going to wake Christine. I don't give a shit! He kicked a vase that had toppled, and it shattered as it collided with a cabinet. You and Christine are done. Do you understand me, Lavinia? I got my inheritance, so I don't need either of you anymore. Vinnie lifted her chin defiantly. Fine. I'll go to my sister's. I'd like to see you try. What do you mean? Bernard smiled wickedly. They don't exist anymore, I'm afraid. Police files will conveniently show they never did. Neither do you, although you're still here. Unlike them. What did your family do to them, Bernard? Vinnie got close to him. Before she could confront him further, he smacked her with enough force to knock her off balance. She toppled to the ground, landing on broken glass. She howled in pain. Get up, he growled. Get the baby and go. Panicked, Vinnie ran to her daughter's room. She didn't even stop to pull the glass out of her knees. The toddler was fussing, but she picked her up and comforted her. A streak of blood dripped from her hand and smeared across the toddler's fiery hair. They'd have to walk past Bernard to leave. Vinnie's heart was pounding as she moved to the window and pried it open with a single hand. She paused only to scoop up a scrapbook with pictures and her daughter's birth certificate before they escaped. Vinnie was dead, as far as Lavinia was concerned. Her whole family was gone, and her past identity was gone. She'd even changed how her name was pronounced, shifting the emphasis from the last I to the first. She'd do anything to ensure Vinnie stayed dead. But now, her baby was gone too. It happened when she saw a woman walking down the street. She vaguely recognized her. She wasn't quite sure where she had seen this person, but she was so familiar. As Lavinia studied her, she realized the woman was crying. "Are you all right?" she asked when the woman neared the bench she and her daughter were seated on. The stranger froze, taking her in with wide, tear-reddened eyes. "You're Lavinia, right? We've met?" "Briefly," said the woman. "I'm Celeste, Ralph's wife. We met at his grandfather's funeral." She choked on that last word, and Lavinia shifted the toddler in her arms so she could tap the bench beside her. Celeste sank down as she began to sob. She leaned forward, a perfect visage of grief, and buried her face in her hands. "What's wrong, Celeste?" "I just buried my daughter," she choked. "Michaela is dying, so Ralph's with her. He doesn't even know our daughter is dead. I fear he won't come back if he finds out. I've never had a job. I won't be on the streets without him. And Goddess, my heart is breaking for my baby." "I'm so sorry," Lavinia said gently. "It's so hard to be surrounded by death. That's how we ended up here, too. I lost my family recently. I can't imagine losing a child." A tiny voice cried out, "I'm so hungry, Mama." Christine started to cry, and Lavinia hushed her gently. "I'm sorry, she's fussy. We don't have much at the moment. We're living in a shed right now. Bernard, he cracked. He's evil. He kicked us out and made sure we had nowhere to go." Celeste lifted her head. "Goddess, Lavinia, I'm sorry. I wish I could help." Looking down at her child, Lavinia's heart sank. She slowly kissed her daughter, then offered her to Celeste. "I think you can, and I think I can help you. Take her home with you, please. Give her the life I can't. Give her the life you would have given to your daughter. Ralph doesn't have to find out. You don't have to lose everything after you've already lost the light in your world." Celeste froze and wiped the tears from her face. She took the toddler in her arms. Christine sniffled, then snuggled into the stranger. "She's beautiful. What's her name?" "Christine." Celeste chuckled. "Christina. That was my baby's name. How old is she?" "Just barely 3 years," said Lavinia. "She's older than my daughter," Celeste lamented. "Ralph will figure it out. He'll know she's not ours." Lavinia's heart dropped again. She opened her purse and produced a scrapbook. "There are pictures of her in here. If you want to fast-track her development and send him updates on her growth spurts, you can pull it off with these. Her birth certificate is in there, too." Celeste, still holding the baby, slowly reached out for the book. She studied it before tenderly caressing the child's hair. "This is crazy, right?" "It would be crazier to let him kick you out after you lost a child. The streets are rough, Celeste." "I'll be good to her, Lavinia. I promise." Act 3. Identity. 2236. It worked. Lavinia was able to eventually find space in a local women's shelter, and she promptly sent a letter to Celeste, praying she was at the same address listed online. Within a few days, a response came. Ralph bought the story, and over the years, he even began to brag about the child. She was special, and she had some big ideas. While Celeste raised her daughter, Lavinia watched from afar. Every so often, Celeste would let her know when they planned to make an appearance in public. Lavinia made sure to be there. She might not be in Christine's life, but she loved watching her grow. Well, she loved watching Christina grow. She often had to remind herself that the child had a new identity and mother now. But Goddess Columbiana, Lavinia still loved her dearly. That was how Lavinia found herself watching as a woman and young girl walked past her. As promised, Celeste and Christine went to the restaurant for lunch that day. While they crossed the street, Lavinia took in the beauty of her young daughter. She was smart, Celeste had said in her last letter. Really smart. Exceptionally smart. Now, watching the way she held herself, Lavinia was proud to note that she was confident, too. And beautiful. So beautiful. Against her better judgment, Lavinia put her head in her hands and cried. All at once, everything hit her. The horror of her reality was too much to process. She'd lost her one true love in her family. She'd lost her identity. She'd lost her daughter, the only real chance she had at growing love again. It had been years, but she still wasn't whole. Seeing Christina, blissfully unaware of what could have been, broke Lavinia this time. She'd seen her many times before, but now she was growing into a whole person Lavinia couldn't know. That hurts. Everything okay? She looked up in embarrassment at the man who had settled beside her on the bench. Well, he wasn't exactly a man. He was a kid, maybe 15 years old. Though he was seated, he had one hand balanced against a cane. He gestured across the street. Did they say something to you? Did they hurt you? Lavinia chuckled and wiped her tears away. Oh, no, not at all. It's silly, actually. They look so happy, and it made me sad. I could have had that, but I lost my family a very long time ago. The boy reached out and covered her hand. How long ago? Lavinia pulled away and he laughed nervously. Sorry, he said. I know it's a hard thing to talk about. I lost my family too. It gets lonely sometimes. Lavinia looked at him sadly. He was so young. She smiled sympathetically, deciding to focus on positivity rather than pity. It happened maybe 3, nearly 4 years ago, but I'm doing okay. I found strength in myself, and though it's hard, I am coping. How long ago did you lose your family? My parents? Over a decade ago. My sister died last year in the accident that cost me my leg. I'm still learning to walk. I can't go far. He gestured to the car just a few feet away at the curb. I can only do a few feet at a time. Are you getting lunch here? Lavinia looked behind her at the fancy restaurant, then looked down at her tattered rags in embarrassment. Oh, no, I couldn't afford... I mean, I'm homeless. I live in a local shelter. I do odd jobs to get by in the hopes that I might get back on my feet someday. I'm sorry, that was insensitive. You said you have a leg injury. The boy laughed, then leaned forward and pried up his pant leg. He tapped a metal prosthetic and grinned up at her as the fabric fell back into place. No, I'm missing a leg, but it's okay. We have to smile through our struggles if we want people to believe we're doing well. Let me make you an offer. If you can help me inside, you can have lunch with me, my treat. I couldn't possibly. Oh, come on, he encouraged. My treat. They won't treat me like a cripple if I have a beautiful woman with me. Lavinia laughed despite herself. A dirty, ill-kept woman, you mean? I also think I'm a bit old for you, kid. And of the wrong sexual orientation, too. He laughed. Oh, this isn't a date, don't worry. But it doesn't negate my offer. What do you say? Lavinia stood and offered him her hands, then pulled him to a standing position. He stumbled a bit, but she caught him. He smiled gratefully, then nodded to the front door. Slowly, they made their way inside the restaurant. The boy requested a table, and Lavinia was surprised when a waiter brought over a wheelchair for the young man and then escorted the pair into a private room. Such service, Lavinia thought, was usually reserved for people viewed as particularly important. The young man ordered, to Lavinia's surprise, wine. As the waiter walked away, she leaned forward and whispered, How can they serve wine? It's been outlawed for years now. Secretly, responded the boy with a wink. And discreetly. Prohibition is just a suggestion. Or, at least, most places consider it to be such. And you're a regular here? Asked Lavinia curiously. It seemed like they knew you. He chuckled. As regular as I can be, I suppose. I don't get out much given the whole learning to walk thing. What's your name? Lavinia Bellamy. He leaned back and considered that. I like that name. It's pretty. I'm Titus. Titus Tarm. Lavinia cocked her head. Like Tarm Industries, that young tech startup that's been in the news? That's the one. My company. Your company? Lavinia asked. You can't be more than 16. Just barely more than 16, actually, he stated. Then with a shrug, he added, It was my sister's company. Was. As I said, she died last year. She was like a mother to me. I'm so sorry for your loss. When those types of bonds shatter, it hurts. There's nothing like that kind of pain. Sympathetically, Titus ran his dark eyes over her face. As Lavinia met his gaze, she spotted the burns on his neck and quickly averted her eyes. He cleared his throat. I'm guessing that losing your family didn't leave you with any inheritance. That's why you're not in a home of your own. The waiter returned with wine before Lavinia could respond. Do you eat meat, Lavinia? I do. Okay, he said. We'll just have my usual then, for each of us. You do like steak, yes? She nodded, and the waiter bowed and retreated. Titus sipped his wine and studied her, then leaned forward again. What would you be doing now if things had gone differently, Lavinia? Product management. What's that? Lavinia sipped her wine, then looked down at the glass gratefully. It was good. She wasn't sure if it was so delicious because she hadn't had wine in years, or if it was truly a well-crafted beverage. A product manager follows a product through its life cycle, working with engineers and marketers alike to identify strengths, narrow in on which features could use refinement, and analyze data to determine the best possible audience. Titus considered that before he lifted his glass to his lips again. Fascinating. And did you ever get a chance to work as a product manager? She shook her head. No, I married young. He didn't let me work, and then he took everything we had. He has family in the police force, so they erased my identity in the government files. I don't exist, Titus. I don't think I'll ever be able to enter my field without that. He stared at her for a long moment, his face set into a terrifyingly emotionless mask. Then he said, We don't have product managers at TI, you know. She blinked. Titus lifted his glass to the light and swished it around. As he observed the liquid, he continued talking. But after talking to you, I think we might benefit from fulfilling such a role, as I have some lofty goals for our products. We're a great employer. We offer decent benefits, company-sponsored housing, and competitive pay. In 10 years, we'll be Tesland's biggest and best tech manufacturer. He took a drink, then set down the glass and traced the rim thoughtfully. We also have people that can help recover your paperwork and restore your records. You deserve your own identity, Lavinia. Wouldn't you say so? With tears in her eyes, she nodded slowly. I'd say so. Great, Titus said. After lunch, I can take you to our company town to pick out a home. Can you start next week? There was a knock at the door. Lavinia tightened her robe and ran her fingers through her hair to make herself semi-presentable. She took a deep breath and opened the front door, then beheld her visitor with surprise. Titus? Good to see you, he said as he pushed the door open with his cane and stepped into the foyer. Almost reluctantly, Lavinia closed the door behind him. I trust the clothing I sent worked out? Embarrassed, she looked down at her robe. Oh, yes, thank you. I apologize for my appearance. I'm in my pajamas. Don't even sweat it. I've got the same plan for myself when I finish up my errands. Still lingering in the foyer, she studied him curiously. Why are you doing this? Because when you help good people, you get good people on your side, he explained. Make the world a better place in a way. My family has always helped people, Lavinia. We build communities and camaraderie. It's what we do. What I do, now that I'm all that's left. Would you mind starting a pot of coffee? Of course, Lavinia said. Can I help you in the kitchen? Be my guest. Titus smiled as she linked arms with him and helped him along. You're really looking well. I'm excited to discuss this paperwork with you. Paperwork? Coffee first, he insisted. I've been working around the clock on this, Lavinia. It's a huge initiative implementing a whole product management team, and I've had to shape some new engineering roles to bridge the gaps between the two groups. She helped him settle in at the table, then started the coffee machine and inserted a new cup of grounds. You're growing a whole team for my sake? He laughed coldly. Not for your sake, Lavinia, for mine. I researched what a product manager is, and if I'm adding one, I need to round out operations and do the same for our other product lines. Business is business, you know? As the coffee pot filled, Lavinia began searching the cabinets for coffee mugs. She knew she had seen them, but she hadn't yet learned where everything in the house was stored. It was fully stocked, and she understood that while she could collect personal items, everything else was to stay in the house whenever it was sold back to the company. How do you take your coffee, Titus? Black. She chuckled and shook her head. You're far too young to drink your coffee black. He watched as she prepared her own mug with sugar and cream, then brought both cups to the table. While her back had been turned, Titus had set down 2 piles of papers to review. Thank you, he said as he accepted the cup. Then he slid 1 paper pile toward her. Here, these belong to you. She picked up the top page and blinked. It was her birth certificate. Below that was a paper that made her heart sink. Her daughter's birth certificate. As she flipped through the paperwork, she saw records of her parents and sister. They were still alive, according to the files. She knew that to be a lie. They were dead, victims of police brutality. That's the family you lost, isn't it? He reached out and covered her hand gently. I have a favor to ask, though it's out of line. Okay. He moved his hand to tap his fingers against the papers. If you let the Mathesius family use these identities for travel purposes, then I'll pay you heavily. The Mathesius family. You're talking about the terrorist group? Titus smiled slowly. The people calling them terrorists are the same government that allowed your family to be killed and wiped from records. While that may be true, the Mathesius family has hurt people. Have they? Lavinia bit her lip and stared at the papers. How much would you pay? I could give you the house, maybe. We'll just put it in your name. Then you can live rent-free for now and profit when you sell it back to Term Industries. Okay, Lavinia said. But not my daughter's name. Titus smiled and sipped his coffee, then set the cup down very slowly. I saw she had your last name. That's unusual. If you don't mind me asking, why didn't she take your husband's name? Because we were arranged and I didn't trust him. Rightfully so. Titus nodded. I suspected as much. My parents arranged a marriage for me when I was a child. When I turn 18, I'm breaking it off. I can't imagine anything more miserable than being married to someone evil and heartless. It wasn't fun, Lavinia lamented. Then she laughed to cover up her sorrow. I'm sorry that you faced a similar fate, Titus. He lifted his cup to his lips and took a deep drink. After smacking his lips, he said, The Mathesius family can get rid of him, Lavinia. I can make that happen. So, is that what Term Industries is then? A cover for a terrorist organization? Titus smiled wickedly. I never said the family is involved with TI. She gestured to the paperwork that remained in front of him. That looks like an employment contract. This is as much about Term Industries as it is about the Mathesius family, isn't it? Perhaps, he said slowly. Lavinia, I know you've heard about the good they do. They save neighborhoods when eminent domain threatens poor homeowners. The Mathesius family removes problematic politicians from office when they make decisions that hurt those communities. I'm an affiliate of theirs, so I was able to restore your identity with their help. You exist again, even if you decide to part ways with Term Industries. And we can make Bernard not exist. You just have to say the word. He's still a lawyer, so he has the power to repeat past wrongdoings. Lavinia tried her jaw, then took a deep breath. Can I think about it? Of course. He slid the second pile of paperwork toward her. As long as working for Term Industries is still a priority. Of course, she echoed. She picked up the paperwork and thumbed through it. Can I read this first? Smart, he said, tapping his temple. He picked up his mug again, then cleared his throat after he took a drink. What was she like, Lavinia? Who? The woman you left when you married him. You were in love, weren't you? Tears stung at Lavinia's eyes, but she laughed and looked away. My, you dug deep, didn't you? Titus didn't respond. She was an artist, Lavinia said quietly. She saw beauty in everything, except herself, I think. We spent a lot of time at the beach together. We always said we'd get a beachfront home or something near the water. But yes, I left her for my marriage, or something like that. He studied her sadly. I don't have a home, you know? Not of my own. I live in an assisted living facility. Because of your accident? Titus nodded. Yes, because of the accident. I can't do much on my own. I spend most days in a wheelchair, both in my living quarters and at work. But it's a blessing, I guess. You were married while you were a minor. I think I would have been too if not for the accident. A blessing disguised as a curse. And you're not in love with anyone? Titus laughed. Not me. Not one like this, at least. I want to have my life together before I find someone, or start dipping my remaining toes into the dating pool. Steam tickled Lavinia's cheeks as she took a drink. A rich, caring guy like you? You'll find the right person in no time. Grinning, Titus looked down into his drink. He'd consumed enough that the level was too low for Lavinia to see the remainder, but she assumed he was looking down at his reflection. Yes, rich. I hope my future other doesn't care. My fiancé cares more about my money and influence than me. I never want to live with that, Lavinia. I understand, she said quietly. She reached out to cover his hand. It gets better. I met you, right? You'll meet the right people. He smiled warmly. I hope so. I just need the right crew in my corner, and then anything can happen. Titus, still in his car, looked up at the Gregorian campus before him. His sister had built it when she headed Tarm Industries, and he'd never particularly liked the corporate office. His family had money, and it was reflected in the extravagance of the building. He, on the other hand, preferred a more charitable approach to wealth. Of course, that was a natural perspective for him. Since the accident, he hadn't owned anything beyond his car. He owned the company, too, but he had an entire board of directors to deal with. And the board? Well, they were the remnants of the Mathesius family. They were bad people, harboring impure ideas about implementing a new government. Titus didn't disagree with their vision, but he believed there was a better way to go about it. Some family members, like George Corduroy, tended toward violence. He didn't trust that. Finally, a golden-haired individual came into the parking lot. Titus raised his hand to wave at him. He approached as Titus rolled down the window. Liam, he exclaimed. Thanks for sneaking out before the meeting. I have a special assignment for you. Liam scowled. Great. This better not anger Corduroy. He's just the chair of the board, Titus said dismissively. This is my company, Liam. I promise I'll keep him in place, especially when I'm appointed CEO. Liam leaned against the car and gazed down at him, carefully chewing over his words. All right, I'll hear you out, man. So that new product manager I recruited, Lavinia, Titus began, shifting to scoop up the top paper from the stack on the passenger seat. I told her about the family, and she agreed to sell her dead relatives' names to us. She had a nasty ex-husband with family ties in law enforcement, so they wiped her family out and made sure they ceased to exist. Which is great news for us, because once we reinstate their identities, there's no death certificate associated with any of them. Damn, Liam marveled. Where do you find these people? I'm a social butterfly. Anyway, she asked me to exclude her daughter's identity from our applications. I suspect she might still be alive. Here, take a look. Titus offered him a loan paper, and Liam pulled it from the car and gazed down at it. Christine Bellamy. All right, I can help Rebecca do some digging. And what if she is? Just let me know. Titus opened the door and eased himself out onto the pavement. He navigated to the back of his car to wrestle his wheelchair out. Liam wordlessly helped him open the chair, then held it steady while Titus settled. Pocket that paper and then grab the sack from the front seat for me. I'm giving these to Corduroy today. Titus stared down into his coffee. He could see a few lone burn marks on his neck. They were remnants from the accident that had cost him his leg. Combined with the use of a wheelchair or his pathetic wobbling as he struggled to learn to walk, he could feel people regarding him with sympathy. I need to do something about these burns, at least, he thought as he gazed at his reflection. His inner monologue was interrupted, however, as the coffee shop door opened. Liam and Rebecca, his trusted friend and his executive assistant, glanced at him in greeting before they headed to the counter to place an order. A few moments later, the pair came to his table. Something about the way they walked spurred his suspicions. There was chemistry there. Being a chemist by trade, he felt he was uniquely poised to identify such. You were right, Liam said. As far as we can tell, she's alive, but she has a different name now. Really? Titus lifted his coffee, took a drink, and sighed contentedly. Do tell. Well, Rebecca began as she opened a binder, the last records we could find for Christine Bellamy were just after the loss of Lavinia's family. A week later, she went to the doctor for a checkup. Liam and I suspect this happened before your friend realized what her husband had done. But then we found something interesting. We traced her fingerprints, Liam said. There's a digital record of the fingerprints existing, but they're associated with a new name now. Christina Simmons. Who, according to our records, is dead. Rebecca adjusted her glasses before she raised her coffee to her lips. She had the separating disease. Died right after everything happened with Lavinia. Titus had his brows furrowed as he stared down at the binder. So, what does this mean? Lavinia's daughter just adopted a new identity as a child? Liam smiled softly. Kind of like someone else we know. Titus looked away. We had our people get eyes on the girl, Liam explained. She answers to Christina, lives with the Simmons family. From what we gathered, the father, Raleigh, was in Europe when his daughter died. So he just came home to a replacement daughter? Titus asked. Does he know? We're not sure, Rebecca said. We couldn't ask him lest we give away the investigation. But we are absolutely certain that Christine Bellamy is standing in for the Simmons daughter. So, does she know? Likely not, Liam said. She's a child. Titus smirked. And so are we. Circumstance mentally ages us, you know. Rebecca glanced over her glasses at him with narrowed eyes. What did you need this information for? To help, my dear friends, Titus said guardedly. You're not going to use Lavinia's child to control her, right? Liam demanded. Look, man, I know when the family was a cult, some mistakes were made. You said your era of leadership won't include any of that. Titus dropped his voice. We're done with the bloodline experiments, Liam, and the social control. Remember the housing I arranged for our workers? I told you, I'm rebuilding this shithole my way. Let me help my friend and keep putting good into the world. I'll tell you how you can start putting good into the world, Rebecca muttered. I know. Corduroy is on my to-do list. Look, once I can walk and once the board gives me my damn title, I'm breaking off my engagement with Liz. The family isn't getting my money. Liam took a deep breath. Damn, man. Okay. Sorry I accused you of being like them. We all know you're better than that. Act 4. Substance. 2246. Christina Simmons stared at the Georgian campus in awe. Her mother, Celeste, unlocked the car and nudged her. Go, I'll be here. Good luck. With a deep breath, Christina opened the door and stepped out of the car. Her heart dropped into her stomach as she approached the corporate campus of Tarm Industries. The main building was huge, and the opportunity to potentially work under the owner of such an incredible company was an honor. Over the past decade or so, the company had grown exponentially. Now it was one of the largest manufacturers, if not the largest, in Tesland. If Christina wanted to start a career in engineering, this was absolutely the right place to be. If I blow this, I'll never be able to move out, she thought glumly. Christina took another calming breath and opened the doors. A huge chandelier hung over the lobby, capturing her attention instantly, even though there were people at the front desk waiting for her to make eye contact. The receptionist smiled, her eyes sparkling behind round glasses that were practically perched on the tip of her nose. The man, whose size and structure was a bit intimidating, also smiled, though his felt less authentic. You must be Christina, the woman greeted. I'm Rebecca. This is Jacob, Mr. Term's bodyguard. He'll escort you to the interview room. Do you need water, coffee, or anything else before you go in? Christina clutched her briefcase close. I'm okay, thank you. I'm ready whenever Mr. Term is. Jacob's lips pulled back in a grin, revealing a really pretty smile. She liked him instantly as he said, Right this way. The pair traveled up a staircase coated in rich emerald green carpet. I didn't expect to be interviewing with Mr. Term himself. Of course, Jacob said, looking over his shoulder at her. He's very particular about who he hires. The position you're interviewing for has been vacant for over a year. Christina gulped. Over a year? Why? Titus is eccentric. The last assistant left just before I was hired. He's a good guy, but he's got a really gruff exterior. Don't take it personally and you'll be fine. Do you think he'll like me? Jacob chuckled. No. Well, I mean, he invited you to come in, and I like you already, so I'm sure you have a fair chance. He stopped before a closed door. Jacob knocked, and when a voice commanded Christina to enter, she cautiously opened it. Jacob stepped back and offered a thumbs up. Beyond the door, leaning in a chair with his feet on the table, was the infamous Titus Tarm. He had a smoking cigar in one hand, though his pose was otherwise relaxed. Christina smiled, stepping into the room. Whoa, that is not a cigar. It sank to high heaven. Nonetheless, she kept a smile plastered on her face. Hello, Mr. Tarm. I'm Christina. I know. He pulled his feet from the table and gestured to the chair across from him. Sit. She sat down expectantly, but he glowered at her for a solid 20 seconds. Titus seemed to be waiting for something, so she opened her briefcase and pulled out a number of blueprints. As she stretched them across the desk, his eyes lit up. These are some of the improvement projects I've taken on. Titus, as regal as he appeared on television, set down his not cigar and picked up the top draft. A pneumatic mailbox. I like it. Thank you. You designed this? He asked, furrowing his brow as he studied the document more closely. Christina nodded. With all due respect, he said, leaning forward to prop his elbows on the desk. This is impressive, but you're rather young. I need someone dedicated to my company's success, someone that wants to know the ins and outs of our biggest projects to ensure they're everything they need to be and more. What's to say I won't be dedicated to Term Industries' success? Christina asked respectfully. Working for such an innovative brand would be a dream. It's not dreamy, he retorted. It's hard work, especially for an internship. You have absolutely no experience. Then why'd you call me here? She asked, this time more firmly. Though she was working hard to maintain a poker face, Christina was growing irritated. Titus could easily see that. She looked a bit like Lavinia, and though she wasn't raised by her, some of her expressions were the same. I didn't call you. My secretary did. I just took the time out of my very busy schedule to talk to you. Obviously, it wasn't too busy for you to forego a smoke break, she said, curling her nose in the direction of his ashtray. And one that doesn't smell particularly legal. Right, he said, setting down the blueprint and crossing his arms. You're not making a particularly good first impression. Neither are you. He curled his lip. I don't think we'll get along very well. That's okay, Christina said, trying her best not to flinch under his glare. Do you want someone you can be friends with, or someone interested in engineering greatness? He smiled suddenly, dropping his intimidating act without an ounce of warning. I knew you were the one as soon as I read through your credentials. As I mentioned, I have a very busy schedule, but Monday's shaping up to be a lighter day, so it would be a good time for you to shadow me and start assisting with design tweaks. There are a few prototypes I'd like to test then. We can talk about your pneumatic mailbox after you're settled in. You're hiring me? Christina asked, surprised. He chuckled. Slow down, I'm not hiring you. I'm offering you a paid internship for a few months. If you can survive in my lab, we'll talk about a job offer down the line. I haven't had an assistant in over a year, but the position is yours if you can prove yourself. Why has it been vacant for so long? Well, 4 people have held the position so far. The first two quit, number 3 was fired, and number 4 barely lasted a month before leaving in the middle of a shift and never contacting me again. 5th time's a charm, right? Christina didn't echo his smile. In fact, she looked wholly unamused. Come on, he said with a grin. You're looking to engineer success, not to make friends. You'll be the one to last. What do you say, start Monday? Titus extended a hand. Christina stared at his hand for a few seconds before she reached out to shake it. He stood quickly, pulling her to her feet, too. Great. Sign the papers at the front desk. Jacob will walk you out. See you Monday. You can show yourself to the door. Thank you? Christina wasn't quite sure what to make of the encounter. She moved to the door as he stood frozen in place, grinning and watching her retreat. When she opened the door, Jacob was leaning against the banister and chatting with Rebecca in the lobby below. He turned to face her. All set? Christina nodded as Titus called, Shut the door behind you. She pulled it shut and walked with Jacob for a few paces before saying, That was not at all what I expected. In a good way? He asked optimistically. I don't think so, she admitted with a nervous laugh. He told me I start Monday. He looked amazed. Wow, congratulations. Amazing. You must have really impressed him. By the way, I'm scheduled Monday at the lab, too. It'll be fun to work together. You got the job? Rebecca said in surprise as they approached. She rapidly pulled some paperwork from a drawer and set it down with a pen. Jacob, show her where to sign. I'm going to go chat with Tarm about onboarding in the meantime. Sure, Jacob said as she stood. While Rebecca retreated, she heard Jacob and Christina chattering excitedly. Jacob was naive, she thought. She could see that this poor girl, just like her birth mother, was getting sucked into working for the Mathesius family. When she approached the interview room, she opened the door. Titus, who was reclined in his chair and clutching a blunt, jumped and fumbled with it. What the hell are you thinking, Tarm? What? Rebecca closed the door. That's the girl you had me and Liam investigate a few years ago. So? He asked defensively. Lavinia's sharp as a tack, and she's a great worker. I have no doubts Christina's every bit as excellent. You're recruiting her for the family, Rebecca stated. Just like you recruited Lavinia. But something tells me you weren't transparent with her in your discussion. I'm recruiting her for TI, he growled. I need a lab assistant. She's an engineer. With an alternate identity to hide under if any of your experiments go south, right? And the only people here that know are you, me, Liam, and Lavinia. Titus hit the blunt and tapped his temple as he exhaled. Exactly. And my people removed the real Christina's death certificate from government databases, so she's safe to pass Corduroy's background checks. Rebecca sat down in front of his desk and glared at his blunt before she adjusted her glasses. So, you're going to have her working on family endeavors, then? He shrugged. If it happens, it happens. Truthfully, Rebecca, I just need more non-family people on my side. Nurturing a promising engineer can lead to transformed profit margins, which gives me more monetary power. I need to show the board that my leadership will propel the company forward in a way they never imagined. Otherwise, I'm disposable. Like my parents. I need to maintain control of the former cult members, and I think this girl can help. So she's promising, then? So promising. After Lavinia told me about her intellect, I connected with her private teacher. She's smart, Becca. Not as smart as me, of course, but a close second. Smarter than the Corduroys. Rebecca's eyes widened. So between you and her, we may be able to come up with a plan to ease Corduroy out of power, Titus said, his eyes sparkling. I'd much rather have Liam leading the board, and I'm sure he'd appreciate a bigger stake in the company. And something tells me you'd like that, too. Why's that? You don't want a more influential boyfriend? At her look of surprise, he laughed and leaned forward to offer her the blunt. Come on, Rebecca. I've known for years. Your romance with him puts you close to the family, which is a scary place to be. You know why we're all treading lightly. She bit her lip and took the blunt. I do worry about his safety, Tarm. I know the Corduroys have had people killed. He's careful, though. I know. I'm the one that pushes the limits. I'm going to do everything I can to keep this girl out of their crosshairs. I want you to know that I pity the closeness you have to maintain to our situation, and I promise to keep our future hires as removed as possible." "Good," Rebecca said as she stood and handed the blunt back. "At the very least, I'm sure Lavinia would appreciate you protecting others from her fates." A few months in, Christina Simmons could honestly say she'd learned more than she had in her many years of study. Titus had an intellect she could only barely comprehend. Of course, she didn't know it had been engineered by a cult. Fortunately, she never asked. Titus liked that about her during the course of the internship. Unlike Lavinia, Christina didn't ask questions often. And when she did, she didn't get upset by his non-answers. He knew he was going to ask her to stay. His mind was buzzing. If she said no, he'd have to start from scratch, seeking another genius to help him fully disassemble the Mathesius family cult. If she accepted the offer of employment, well, she might become the only person who could continue his studies and his mission if the Corduroys ever successfully disposed of him. When Christina approached the workstation, Titus was hovering over various test tubes full of liquid. "I need you to grab some gloves and help out over here." Christina followed his gaze to the nearby safety equipment. Obediently, she slipped her hands into a pair of navy blue gloves and pulled on some goggles. "I'm not a chemist, you know." "That's all right," Titus said. "I am. Just follow my instructions very closely." He instructed her to move a beaker with tongs as it was hot, and then offered direction while she spread its contents into trays to cool. Christina struggled to keep a steady hand, but she stubbornly managed to move the beaker from the convection burner to the trays. Gingerly, she tilted the beaker to allow it to trickle. The thick liquid settled in an even glassy layer. "What is this stuff, Titus?" "Don't worry about it." "Fine. Thank you for your help. Move the last few solutions over here to cool and we're set. Please clean the workstation before you head back to your projects." Christina grumbled under her breath while he traipsed off to his office. Once the entire batch of mystery liquid was cooling on the trays, Titus could hear her cleaning up and washing. He was seated at his desk, staring at a plan he'd drawn up for an electric circuit disruptor. He wanted to focus on analyzing it for improvements, but his mind kept wandering. The use of this device, and any similar ones for that matter, hinged on his ability to secure a co-conspirator. He needed her to agree to stay at Tarp Industries. While he tried to focus, someone knocked on the door. "Go away," he called. "I'm busy." Christina opened the door and strolled in. "Do you ever listen?" "I do." She set a blueprint in front of him. "I cleaned your workstation. You're welcome. Now, I wanted to talk to you about this design. It needs an overspeed sensor. That's what we were missing." He responded as he studied the pneumatic mailbox design. "To keep the projectile from, well, becoming a projectile if it gains too much speed?" "Yes, I think you're right." "Add that to the notes and file it to go to Capital Factory for building and testing." "Yes, sir." She turned to leave. Christina, she corrected sharply. "Come back after you're done with that." "My shift ends in 10 minutes, Tarm." He rubbed his temples. "Great. Leave the door open." She disappeared around the corner, and Titus shifted as his wristwatch vibrated. He silenced the alarm, grabbed a pill bottle from his desk, and fished a white tablet out. He picked up his water. In the dim light, his reflection was faint. He couldn't see the discolored skin on his neck. He smiled to himself as he took the pill, imagining the collagen formation that was slowly taking place over the course of his treatment. One day, he might have a normal body again. His skin might be unmarred, as if the incident had never happened. Of course, his prosthetic leg would make it hard to ever fully forget. "I'm back." He looked up at Christina in surprise. She was hovering before him, her arms crossed across her chest. "Your contract expires today, you know." "Oh." She slowly lowered herself into a chair before the desk. "I didn't realize." "You must not have read it then. You need to read every piece of paperwork I give you. It's always excessively long." He rolled his eyes. "So it is. I need you to make a choice, Chris." "Christina!" "Come on," he said playfully. "Let me save myself a couple syllables. I'll let you call me Ty. Only my closest friends and family get that honor." "Gross. Hard pass." He sighed. Okay, I'm done with the small talk. Look, do you want to keep your job or not? She studied him, clearly searching for any sign that he might be bluffing. You want to hire me? For real? He leaned back and crossed his arms. While he had always appeared pleasant enough on television, Christina had learned in the previous few months that he was actually anything but. Working for him was hard, and the pay wasn't exactly fantastic. Only if you were interested in staying, he said. If you want to leave, I'll give you a glowing review, and I'd be happy to introduce you to some peers in the business. I don't want to hire you if you aren't going to stay long term. Does it come with a pay bump? He smiled. Christina had hardly seen him smile in the time she'd been working with him. Of course. At offer of employment, we always double internship rates. We also have an annual review cycle that will regularly bump that up based on performance. You do good work, Chris. I'd love to keep you here. Oh, she said with surprise. Wow, thank you. When do I start? Still smiling, he said, let's get coffee this weekend to go over that new contract, and we'll figure it out then. Christina walked into the coffee shop at the edge of the warehouse district and saw Titus already seated with 2 cups of coffee. He smiled as she approached. She was instantly taken aback by his casual demeanor. Hey, he said as she settled into the chair. Thanks for meeting me. I thought it would be easier to discuss your new contract away from the nosy security team. Jacob? She asked with a laugh. He doesn't care what's in my contracts. He chuckled and sipped his coffee. It's not Jacob that I'm concerned about. I want to help you succeed, so I'm going to walk you through this, and we're going to discuss some things the board of directors won't love. Like what? She asked curiously. Titus watched with a sparkling gaze as she sipped her coffee. Whew, that's strong. Mind if I grab some cream and sugar? Allow me. He stood and slid a stack of papers toward her. Skim while I'm gone. He could tell she was bored before his back was turned. He made a mental note that this solution was a bit too bitter. Even coffee couldn't conceal its sharpness. It was a naturally occurring tropane alkaloid that he had chemically altered, and he'd tested it extensively with Rebecca and Liam. Christina was his first uncontrolled subject, and she evidently had more sensitive taste buds. A minute later, Titus had a much lighter brew before Christina and settled into his seat. He watched as she took a drink and nodded approvingly at the new balance. He needed her to consume at least 1 more dose. The drug would temporarily alter the function of her prefrontal cortex, and she'd struggle to lie to him. He needed complete transparency from her in this moment, so he picked up his coffee mug and raised it in cheers. After she'd taken another drink, he cleared his throat. The NCC on page 3 is the first thing we need to talk about, he stated. She quickly flipped through the document and started skimming. Our non-compete clause for positions like yours is strict. So strict that, I believe, it could prevent you from working as an engineer at all if you leave my employment. That's awful. That's why we're meeting away from the laboratory cameras, he said with a wink. He pulled out a red pen, crossed out the section, and scribbled a note. Let's make this just an NCC for tech companies of comparable size. There are none that quite compare, so you'll be free to move on to the next great engineering position if we part ways. Why are you helping me, Tarm? He frowned, then set down the pen. Quite frankly, Christina, it's refreshing to have someone so talented helping out without threatening to leave. I want to make this relationship beneficial to us both, because as much as it pains me to say it, I need your mind on my side. The board will support my changes so long as we make it sound like these were your demands. She reached out to touch his hand. Thank you. Don't touch me. And you're welcome. Let's take a look at that invention assignment agreement next. How do you feel about joint ownership of your inventions? You and I will own them rather than the company. If you leave, you'll get residuals. All right. That sounds like a plan. What's next? The NDA, he said. We're not going to change it, but I do need you to understand what it means. We'll be working on some very secret projects that could give our competitors an edge if they learn about them during the development phases. You can't talk about them to anyone. Okay. And there will be times where I can't talk to you about them. I may ask you to work on projects without giving you background. Are you prepared for that? She shrugged. I mean, I'm nosy, so no. But it's fine, I guess. He grinned. I know you are. Keep up that curiosity. It'll take us places. Anyway, this number here is the salary slated for the role. Are you good with that? You can tell me it's too low. She tried her jaw. To her, it was a significant bump. I mean, it looks good to me. Chris, he stated, cocking an eyebrow. There will be times I ask you to work on things without any background. You won't be able to talk about them or ask me questions. Look at that number again and think about that. She studied the paper for a long moment before she nodded. 10,000 more? He crossed the number out and wrote the new rate in. You happy with that? She nodded. Okay, sign here. Christina picked up her pen and signed the document. She turned it back to Titus and he penned his own name right under her signature. How odd it is, he thought, that neither of us truly owns these two names, and only one of us knows it. Titus allowed the ink to dry for a moment before he closed the document. Welcome to Tarm Industries, new recruit. Now, come Monday, I have a very special project for you. What do you know about electrical circuits? Okay, hold that steady for me, Titus instructed as he eased his goggles into place and fired up a torch. Christina was unflinching as he leaned forward and welded the pieces together. When he turned off the torch, he lifted his goggles and smiled at the motherboard. It'll work, Christina said confidently. I told you my engineering skills were on fire. Let me tell you who I'd like to fire, Titus grumbled. Christina grinned and pulled her goggles off. So where's this thing going? Nowhere yet. Its implementation is a few years out. We'll have to build a hangar behind the lab for bigger projects first. Ooh, I love architecture. I don't care, Titus said. It's not going to be pretty. It'll be practical. Christina huffed and crossed her arms, the goggles hanging from her left hand. That seems like a rather sexist assumption. Did I make this thing pretty? It's not a sexist assumption. It's assumed because I know you. So you probably also know I'm thinking of smacking that smug look off your face, since you know me so well. Right. But you're also thinking that I'm too tall for you to do that without jumping. She sighed. I'm starting to hate working for you. Give it time. You'll hate it even more, especially once you realize that no other companies will give you this kind of hands-on experience. The overhead speaker blared, then Jacob's voice echoed throughout the lab. Hey, Tarm, you've got an employee at the door. Excuse me, Chris. Titus set his tools down and marched to the front door. His prosthetic locked for a second, so he huffed, leaned down to fumble with the spring beneath his knee, and then continued to the entryway. He opened the door and stepped back. Lavinia, you're earlier than expected. So was Katara, Lavinia explained. She stepped into the lab to allow him to close the door. The shipment from Calliope came in without issue, so our people moved it to Capital Factory. I understand there's something else you'd like to move today, so I stopped by to get some measurements. The pair started walking toward the work area, and Titus saw his assistant glance in their direction curiously. He shook his head, so she looked away quickly. The brief interaction distracted him from Lavinia's speech, which trailed off in silence until they passed. Who was that? Lavinia finally asked as they approached a storage room. Titus, who was keying a code into a lock, glanced at her dismissively. Christina. She was an intern, but I just hired her on as my lab assistant a few weeks ago. As he opened the door and stepped into the storage space, Lavinia followed him. She closed the door quickly and moved close. Tarm, that's my daughter. Remember how I mentioned that she was studying engineering? Ah, is it? He asked. Odd, I didn't see your name come up in her background check. She does good work. I guess you wouldn't, Lavinia said. She was adopted by another family when we were homeless. He studied her, then sighed and put a hand on her shoulder. Hey, you're not going to get emotional on me, are you? What? Absolutely not. Do you want to meet her? No, Lavinia said sadly. And please don't tell her you know me. I doubt her mother has told Christina that she's adopted. Her father is, like your husband was. Lavinia nodded. Yeah, like Bernard. Is she... She's not doing what I'm doing, right? Titus cocked an eyebrow. Working for the family, you mean? No, she isn't. I've kept her separated from their directives, unlike you. I need you to move this down to Pais for me. He pulled a tarp off a tall mechanical object, and Lavinia instantly stepped back and covered her mouth in shock. The motion sent dust motes flying through the air, and as they settled, Lavinia's eyes widened. What is that? Titus folded the tarp and set it on a nearby box, then brushed his dusty hands on his pants. Corduroy had me and a team of engineers working on this back when I took over TI operations. I've since terminated our contract with the Crown. You made this thing for the Sands regime? He rolled his eyes. Yes, a long time ago. To my knowledge, the mechs haven't been used. But if they are... Well, I'm thinking about getting weapon production up and running again, but this time it will be done under my direction rather than Corduroy's. And I'd like you to oversee that process, Lavinia. I won't let the family get involved. Her eyes were wide. And who would we be making weapons for, then? He gestured to the mech suit. It was largely a pair of robotic legs, and its height made it seem perfectly poised to crush civilians. Whoever needs it, assuming the Sands regime ever puts these things into practice. Since Corduroy had us make these things, they haven't left my mind. So, what are you going to do with this one? I'm going to take it apart and reflect on the design, Titus said. I'm going to use it to inform future decisions, and I'm going to use it to brainstorm a way to stop these things. I need a bigger, badder weapon. And you, Lavinia, will conveniently not mention this to any family members in TI. She huffed. Right, because the board calls me so often. I'm talking lower-level members, Titus said, like Joe Field-Smith or Jacob Mertens. Right now, Lavinia, you and I are the only ones that know my intentions. Although I will ask you to give Captain a heads up, as I would like him to transport this and future weapons. Why not Katara? She's already here. Her ship's cargo hold isn't big enough, he said. And her crew isn't scrappy like Captain's. They've docked at ports during civil uprisings. They were in Kemet during its fall. This won't scare them. I'll let Katara know, Lavinia promised. Any products I can assign to her crew for shipment? Titus scratched his head. Yeah, I think I have a shipment ready for Canada. Confirm with the Capital team that the dental spoon excavators are ready before you inform her. You got it. The lights flickered and Titus scowled. Damn it, Christina. I knew I shouldn't have left her unsupervised. He lifted his wrist and typed a code into his watch. When he spoke next, his voice came through the overhead speakers. Chris, you just locked me in, you dim bulb. You better get over to the storage space and open the damn door. He turned his watch off and huffed as Lavinia raised her eyebrows. Is that how you always talk to her? Titus chuckled. It's how we show affection in the lab. You should hear Jacob and me. Hey, Tarm, you useless browbeater, came Christina's voice through the door. You gonna be nice to me if I open this? No, he retorted. But I will put you on a performance improvement plan if you don't. What does that entail? Being on probation for 30 days? That doesn't sound too bad. Christina. Fine. A few numbers clicked on the keypad and the door opened. Before it was wide enough for her to see in the room, Titus stepped in the doorway. Lavinia, he said over his shoulder. Measure her up and send a message to the vagabond with the dimensions for shipping. Now that a power outage hasn't reset the lock, you'll be able to come right out when you're done. Make sure you cover it up before you leave. Yes, sir, she said as he stepped out and allowed the door to swing shut. Titus glared at Christina as they started walking. You never listen. I know you were playing with that circuit disruptor prototype while I was gone. She rolled her eyes. I just wanted to see if it was live. But I do want to ask. This thing seems kind of dangerous, doesn't it? Like it could be a weapon in the wrong hands? Titus scoffed. It's a safety precaution. Remember when that motor caught on fire? She huffed. Yes, I remember. And I remember how long it took you to get to the breaker box. But still, Tarm Industries would never resort to making weapons, Chris. I prefer to keep death and politics out of my business. And that's the end of Poor Vinnie's Valor. The story continues in Part 1 Experiment, which is Christina's wartime journal, or The Inconvenience of Time, which is Captain and Saida's story, free on Kindle Unlimited. Thanks so much for listening in. If you'd like to hear more content, swing by my Instagram page at author Nikki Elizabeth.